I'm good. How are you? So good to see you again.
Yeah, so good to see you too. Yeah, been well. I've been well busy writing a story, trying to find the voice of this new story. See,
Fantastic. Fantastic. So here we are with our fifth episode. Can you believe it?
wow, amazing, amazing.
And I must say that our all our viewers, all our listeners, they have been very, very sincerely listening to our shows, our podcast episodes. So we're very thankful to them.
Yeah,
One request to all of you, whoever is listening, whoever is seeing us today, that please remember to subscribe to our channel. This will just help the community to reach out to more people so that, more like-minded people could hear us and share their views with us.
definitely. Please do. Thank you so much, actually. Very grateful for that. Yeah.
So again, welcome to Picture Book Matters podcast. And for those who do not know us, so we are Eva and Smita. Eva is an award-winning author and editor, and I'm Smita, Debasmita Dasgupta. Actually, I am a picture book illustrator, a graphic novelist, and a film producer. And together we have co-founded Picture Book Matters, which is a platform to support emerging and aspiring picture book creators.
Yes.
We are also the co-founders of this podcast, Picture Book Matters podcast, where we share our ideas, our experience dealing with the picture book industry. And today we have a very special topic. And over to you, Eva. What is the topic that we will be discussing today?
So today we're going to be looking at voice and style, and voice when you're a writer, and obviously style, which is a type of voice, I guess, in illustration. So, and how the two things have to kind of work together um, in a picture book making process, I guess. Yeah.
Yes. It's actually, you're right. It's a super interesting topic because I know it has been discussed many times by many people, but, and you and I also felt
Mm,
that whether we should be talking about it. But I just want to make sure that people understand we come from the diverse children's book industry background, right? So in diverse storytelling, I feel that this whole idea of voice and style becomes even more important. I mean, of course, it is an important topic, but in our case, it brings a different kind of dimension to storytelling. Do you agree?
do you mean by a different kind of aesthetic, maybe?
Yes,
Or a
that
different type of way of storytelling?
I think in terms of identity,
Mm,
because voice or style has got to do a lot with identity. It's after all, it's your personal voice, right? Your personality is speaking through the work that you create. So it has got to do a lot with your identity, with your background, and that's where I feel that this voice and style becomes even more. I won't say important, but even more relevant to
mm.
diverse creators.
Y- Yeah, I guess not just diverse in this sense, but all illustrators and
Hmm.
all writers have a particular voice you recognize. I
Yeah.
think maybe we can distinguish or we can separate voice from style and signature. So, for
Hmm.
example, Quentin Blake as an illustrator, when you look at the illustration, straight away you recognize, oh, this is a Quentin Blake, or this is a Helen Stevens, or this is a Debasmita Dasgupta.
Hmm.
Like when you look at that, um, so I guess it's a signature in illustrations. I would say,
Hmm.
and in terms of voice in writing is actually very layered. There's so many things you could talk about. The voice of the narrator, who may be a fictional character, the voice of the author who is doing the writing, um, the voice of the characters, because when you are writing a story, obviously your story is peppered with characters, right?
Yeah.
Or so there are all these different types of voices that a writer has to take care of. And sometimes it can get quite complicated, I
Hmm.
feel.
Hmm.
Um, I mean, for picture books, normally we have one main character,
Yeah.
right? And that one main character is the character that we see their world or the world of the picture book through
Yeah.
the point of view, right? So I guess as a picture book author, I have to be very careful of that voice. Is
Yeah.
that voice a child's voice, an adult voice? Who is my character? So I always have to go back to the drawing board.
Right.
Sometimes there are, obviously in a story, there's one main character, especially picture books, right? But there will be a secondary character that supports this main character. That
Yeah.
secondary character could be an animal. It could be, a parent, an adult,
Hmm.
all depending on the story. And then you'll have to get that voice right too as an author.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Does it work in illustrations? How?
It does. I mean, you're right. There is a distinction between voice and style. And of course, the voice here, what you are explaining, that in the case of illustrations would be completely depending on the scope of the story. So the scope of the story would dictate the voice in the illustration. So, for example, the point of view, like you said, for example, if the story is written from the point of view of a particular character, then the illustrations, the compositions are also created from that point of view. It could
Mm-mm.
also be done from a very neutral point of view if the story is written in that fashion, right? Then what you see is a very neutral thing. You see the subject and the predicate together, whereas when it's a subject telling the story, it's a subject's point of view in the form of illustrations. So the voice is definitely, it depends on the scope of the story. But what I was mentioning is more about the style, and like you said, it's a distinct. There is a special a distinction between the voice and the style. And I just want to go back one more time just to clarify why I said that the style becomes even important for a diverse creator is because we're all a work in progress, right? And the children's book industry is also a work in progress. It's constantly evolving. There were not many diverse storytellers to start with, but now we see, which is a great thing, that we see more and more diverse storytellers coming to this international world of storytelling. And that's where I think your style is very important as an illustrator because you are bringing something which is very related to your own identity. And there is a chance where somebody else could actually influence that style, which is at your core. And that's where I feel that it's important for a diverse creator to recognize that core of yours and reflect it, make a conscious effort to bring it forward when you are narrating your story, when you are illustrating your story. So that's why I think that style becomes very important for a diverse creator in this diverse storytelling world.
Yeah, I agree. You're right. As I was listening to you, I was thinking about my voice as an
Yes.
author.
Hmm.
Someone had said to me that my voice is a magic realist voice, and I was like, oh, I didn't realize that there was a voice in that, but I know that there is a genre, magic realism, which I really love. There is realism in the story. There's also magic. Who doesn't love a bit of magic, right? So, and when she had said that to me, it made me think about, like, how my voice is like that or perceived to be this way. Because,
Hmm.
it's also a perception, isn't it? How other people see you as an illustrator, how other people see or read your book, because it's all about the reader experience, right?
Hmm.
Or the
Hmm.
viewer experience in art. Um, I was rather surprised. And then I went and I looked at the stories that I've been writing, some published and, some others are not, and I realized that um, I like telling stories within stories. It's become a style of mine, right? And I didn't actually think about this before. It was so unconscious, right? That it just came out, in the stories I tell. And And it was only because this person said my voice is magic realism that I went back and I had a look and I realized that yes, there is this realism in the stories I tell. There's also a bit of magic in it.
Hmm. Hmm. Absolutely. Tell me something. I mean, this is something I have experienced, and I'm sure you too. You know, when we do our workshops, our master classes, whether it's through Picture Book Matters or we do it by ourselves, often we come across this question: how to develop my own
Mm.
voice in writing or my own style in illustrations. What would be your suggestion? What would be your recommendation?
I think voices are unique to anybody, to any person, right? I mean, the sound of one's voice is unique,
Yeah.
the cadences, the s- the language is also unique. I mean, English, although I say English is my mother tongue, which it is because I was brought up in English, but I also grew up in a world where, very quickly I had second language, Mandarin as my second language. I had to learn that. I was surrounded by the different types of languages as you are growing up, in India, right?
Hmm.
So all these become the voices that I write with,
Yeah.
right? And as academics know, there are many different types of Englishes, as we call it,
Hmm.
right? There's no one type of English, right? So as a writer with a background like that, I often ask myself, how do I write a story that is understood globally by the global English-speaking population?
Hmm.
And also as a writer, because now I've learned that, you cannot just write in English. You have to write in English with a view to be translated, you know, because
Yeah.
publishing is a business.
Hmm.
And and maybe one day we can talk about all that in another podcast. So now I write in mind with, okay, if I say this, how is it going to be translated in, say, Mandarin? Or this sentence, how would it sound in Italian, which I speak as a third language? Or
Right.
how would it sound in Spanish? Because Spanish is the largest whatever Romance language in the world, right?
Hmm.
Because Spanish has a big market in the USA,
Hmm.
right? So now I write with that in mind, which I think some people may think, oh, it's very uh, restrictive,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
But a voice is something you discover, right?
Yeah.
Voice is something you work on. So I have joy and I find it very interesting personally to
Hmm.
just say something, say something in Italian and convert it into translate it into English and vice versa. Right. So
Right. Right.
I mean I just have fun in doing that. And I think that's how I hone my voice, I guess.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, in illustrations, there's something that I always tell my my students that, see, one thing is getting influenced by different artists, right? And especially for illustrators, because of the world of Instagram, you get so many other artists or other illustrators to see. And there is inevitably, there will be this uh, attraction towards certain styles that you would appreciate more. And then that appreciation becomes or translates into the stage of imitation. So from appreciation, it quickly becomes imitation without even consciously knowing that you're imitating a particular style. And then in that process, what I feel is the artist loses his or her own style. So this is something that I always recommend, that don't look at one artist's work, look at many artists' work. And then, you are not imitating one particular artist. You are seeing many, many people, many, many art forms. And then from there, you are bringing all of those things together. And at its core, it's your own identity, your own personality, which becomes the core, and the rest of it becomes the other layers around it. And that defines your style, your identity, your voice in the work that you create. So it's very important that you don't start looking at only one or two illustrators and start copying them or imitating them. Instead, look at many people, many influences, and gather them all, filter, something from there, and then hone your craft accordingly. So that's kind of, I would say, that's a tip to create your own style in illustrations.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the same for writing. I think all writers would have heard, if you want to be a good writer, then you have to read a lot,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
And read not just the genre that you like reading in, read other things so that you see how different writers write and what the different kind of voices that are used to write certain nonfiction or fiction or creative nonfiction. I think the thing here is not about copying but more so about emulating, because there will be someone you love a lot,
Yeah.
like in style,
Yeah.
or like for me, in writing. And I am always constantly awed by beautiful prose, lyrical language, right? And I'm thinking, oh my God, if I could just, if I only thought of that sentence, right?
Yes.
But if
Yes.
I had written it exactly the way it is, then it becomes copying and
Yeah.
imitating, right?
Exactly.
But if I emulate it and then try to find a way to say it in my own voice, right?
Mm. Mm.
And there's no right voice or wrong voice. There
No.
really isn't.
Mm.
It's what works for you, right? And you'll discover that once you start, for a writer, putting, pen to paper, really.
Right. Right. Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, for illustrators, it's a bit difficult because, it's not, of course, you're not copying one line. It's like if you're illustrating in a particular way just by looking at one artist over and over again, then automatically your illustration style will be heavily influenced by that artist's style. But then your style is getting lost. And I have seen that in many of my students, and I've told them specifically when we do portfolio reviews that try to create your own style. Like, don't just follow this one illustrator or one school of illustrators. They have a certain way of illustrating, and if you keep following them, then you become just part of that league. So you don't get a chance to develop your own style. So it's very important, like you said, read more. It similarly see more, get more influences in your life, in your artistic life. uh, I guess that also brings me to another point, that one needs to also be a bit more fearless in trying out different things, right? When you're developing your style, it's important to just experiment with different ideas, because sometimes you feel, and this I'm saying, I'm talking from an illustrator's point of view, whether it's the watercolors or pastels or ink or different kind of color palettes. I have had those inhibitions in the beginning, that I only wanted to work with certain color palettes which I'm more comfortable with. Of course, that helped me develop a certain style, but then at the same time, I realized that my color palette is not the limiting factor. That is not my style, right? Those are the ingredients, but at its core, there is something else. Is it very similar in case of writing as well?
Hmm. It's a little bit different. I mean, for me as a writer, I was just thinking as you were saying that,
Yeah.
because in writing we have passive voice and active voice,
Hmm.
which I suppose in art there's less of that, but in art you see movement. Maybe that
Yes.
is
Yeah.
the whatever active voice in art, right? But in writing itself, as a form of grammar, there is active voice and passive voice. And an exercise that I like to kind of challenge my students to do is to write your story 500 words in the active voice, and then write the same story 500 words in the passive voice, and see how that changes, and see, line for line, what changes for you, or whether the meaning of the word, of the sentence, changes. Because in writing, it really is at the line level. When people do line editing, I mean, at the line level, we are looking for meaning, right?
Hmm.
Where we ask ourselves, like, what did the author mean by this sentence?
Hmm. Hmm.
right? So where is the focus? So, when you do active and passive voice, you will see where the focus changes, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I think that's a quite fun exercise. It challenges your brain a bit.
100%, 100%. And I think it's also a fun exercise for illustrators, like how you're defining as a writer when you write it from different point of views. Then it is also for the illustrator, it also becomes quite interesting, right? There is this whole idea of what do you call that? That narrative where the person is there is a it becomes opposite in the end. Like there is a certain term I'm forgetting. It's called something which is narrative something, where you're seeing a story from one point of view, and towards the end, that point of view changes. Is there a particular term for that?
Oh, yes, I know what you mean. It is a limited oh my God, I forgot now.
I
There
know,
is the
right? It's
there's the omniscient narrator, and there's the um limited third whatever it is called, narrator, where you're looking at it from this particular point of view, and then it
exactly.
switches, right? And then that happens a lot in movies actually sometimes.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
and that's quite fun to play with. I mean, it works. I think a voice like that works for crime story, for example, or or
Right,
thriller maybe.
right.
Yeah, but for picture book, it's more about breaking the fourth wall,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
And some authors do it really well, where they take the risk, right? They go along, and suddenly something happens and it changes everything, right? And usually these are also authors that have already been in the picture book making business a long time.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
there's someone that I want to mention, but obviously I do not remember his name at the moment. But it's really about breaking the fourth wall, and it's quite fun to do,
Yes.
right? It's children love surprises,
Hmm.
so
Hmm. I
and
yeah.
it's quite a fun way of getting children interested in storytelling,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm. Hmm. I think the word that I was looking for, it suddenly occurred to me. It's unreliable narrator.
And yes, unreliable narrator. Yes.
Yes. Yes. It's so
Oh my
suffocating
goodness.
sometimes, like it's there, but it's not coming. Yeah.
Tell
And
me.
I have done it. Maybe we could do a separate session on that, because that's very interesting. And I had the experience of working with unreliable narratives once, and it was like you said, it was a thriller, and I did it in the form of a short graphic novel, so a graphic novella, and it was so much fun, illustrating from the point of view of one character. It changes, like the story perspective changes, and then how you see the illustration perspectives change. So it's quite visual, this whole idea of becoming like this unreliable narrator. So, yeah, perhaps we could do that. But before we end today about, this episode, voice and style, maybe we could end by giving our viewers a particular tip or idea or suggestion, comment, feedback. How would you like to put it? Um, you want to share something just specific to voice and style?
Sure. I was just thinking that we have so much to talk about always, right? There's always such the time is always so limited. So a tip, something that I learned whilst I was working, I think I spoke about it earlier about how I didn't think that I liked nested, or I didn't think that I had a magic realist voice. I also didn't think that I could write nested narratives,
Hmm.
right? What a nested narrative is a story within a story.
Hmm.
And to do it in picture book format is actually very, very challenging, because you have two stories in one story, and you have only 800 words and less to do it.
Hmm.
And then the third storyteller is really the visual artist, is the
Yeah.
illustrator. So
Yeah.
you have all these things working together, right? But I mean, I chanced upon it by accident, I would say. is
Mm.
because I was looking at the oral tradition of storytelling. Because obviously someone is telling the story, isn't it? To
Yes.
and then and 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 then I thought, what if that oral storyteller is in my story?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
um I think another topic we could actually even talk about is how to turn ideas into stories.
Yes.
Because, that was an idea that I made into a story,
Mm. Mm.
right? So not really a tip, but just a kind of a sharing because,
Mm.
writing and illustrating is a creative process, and there is no
Mm.
stopping the creative process. It goes everywhere, right?
Yes.
One idea churns another idea, and it goes on and on and on. So
Right.
to find your voice, I think going back to the voice is really to read a lot and then to write, to experiment, to see, to write drafts and drafts of stories. It doesn't have to be
Mm.
perfect,
Mm.
right? And
Mm.
that, and yeah.
Right, right. And yeah, I think that's a beautiful thought, and I would just echo that thought and take it one step forward to say that we are all a work in progress. So that's why your style is also going through evolution all the time. So don't think that if you have a certain style today, that is going to remain your style forever. And we have seen that with many artists or even with many writers or any creatives, even filmmakers, when we watch their previous works and when we see their contemporary work, we feel like, oh, things have changed. But at its core, I think it's very important that you retain those fundamental values that have shaped you, that have shaped your
Mm,
ideology, your philosophy, your maybe your spiritual being as well, because that is always the mark of a creative person who really knows herself or himself very well, right? Because that core doesn't change. A lot of layers on top of it they keep changing.
yeah,
They keep changing their colors, their shapes, their forms, and that's the form of, that's how evolution works. But at its core, that living thing is there, and it's also our responsibility, I guess, as a creative person to keep that alive. And the one way to keep that alive is through curiosity. So never
absolutely.
let your curiosity die.
Exactly. Go and be curious. Yeah,
Yes.
totally, totally, 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, it's been great. Always chatting.
Great.
Yeah,
Great.
always great.
It's been great talking to you as always, and I hope our viewers have also enjoyed listening to us. We are
Yeah.
trying to limit our podcast episodes, though. I mean, for everybody to know
Yeah.
that Eva and I we're strictly following a timeline today to keep
Yes.
our podcast short because some of our viewers have told us to keep it shorter. But if you have otherwise, if you have other thoughts, if you think it should be more relaxed and a little more long form-ish, then feel free to share that feedback as well.
Yeah, let us know. Yeah. Okay, Smita, it's been really great. I'll talk to you
Great.
next time. Yeah.
Yes, take care
Okay. Take
and bye
care.
bye.
Bye bye.